welcome everyone. This is a webinar that Mark and I are putting on for my group, Coaching from Three Principles Understanding. It's really a webinar to highlight some of the things that we have created in our self-study course for coaches, which has been really well received over the last few months. We've invited people who are on the webinar tonight to leave us any questions that they might have around that, and hopefully everyone will have a great experience, because one of the things that I've really loved about the program is that it's not just me or just you, Mark, but we've created it together, and each of the videos we had both of us on there, and
Yes.
and we're both whilst we're both grounded in the three principles understanding, we have different styles and different viewpoints, and I know that you really added a lot to the things that I was I guess were kind of more my areas, if you like, of the course, and you've told me vice versa as well. So hopefully we can give everyone an experience of that tonight.
Oh, yeah. I would love that. Yeah. Same thing here. It was just really a work of love and service, and something that developed when you and I connected deeply 3 years ago, and wanted to do something for the community. And there was no way I could imagine the beautiful creation we developed together, and really complementing one another with our knowledge of practicing the principles in a health setting, or from a health profession, mostly coaching.
So I just realized I'm assuming everyone knows who you are, but that may not be the case. And we'll also be sharing this recording on my YouTube channel.
Oh.
So, people may find this who don't know about you, Mark. So
yes,
I really want to get into the questions and helping coaches today. But could you just kind of give us a very brief overview of kind of who you are, your background as a psychologist, and your work with the 3Ps over the last several decades?
Yeah. So I'm a licensed psychologist, PhD level psychologist, who met Sydney Banks in latter part of 1982 and into 1983. And had a very powerful insight in meeting him, and ever since then have been deepening my own understanding, but bringing this understanding of Sydney Banks' teachings to humanity, to my patients and clients throughout the years. But I have also mentored a lot of health practitioners, psychologists, psychiatrists, coaches, all kinds of health professionals. And for 18 years, I ran a monthly practitioner group for people in a county here who were bringing the principles into a community and developing many different three principles programs. And I've been continuing to do that since then. So almost 40 years now with this understanding, and hopefully I'll get it right someday. But it's been a beautiful journey, and really connected with a lot of people through the years, and actually just thrilled to be here and also to share whatever I've seen with you all today. I also am married for 50 years. In June, I was married 50 years in June, and I give a lot of credit to the deepening of that relationship, to my understanding of Sydney Banks' teachings, and have a 10-month-old grandson. So that's me.
Thank you for sharing that, Mark. And I think it's important as well, actually, to see that, one of the things I've noticed a lot about people who've been doing this work, full time and doing it for a significant amount of time, is that it's not only their professional success, but actually, who they are and the way they show up in their personal lives really drew me in, to see, well, maybe there is something more to this understanding that I didn't see initially, and certainly that the impact of it was really quite significant. We've got a couple of questions at the moment, but I want to start with the second question we got from Britt, because one, she has to leave a tad early, so Artal will come back to you. Don't worry, but I think it's a really nice question to start us off today.
Yeah.
And Britt's question is, what prompted you to start the program that you felt was different, / that there could be more of than other 3P coaching programs? What was a missing link, per se? Would you mind if I answer that first, Mark? And then I would love to hear, your take on that, because I think we might have, our own views on it, although I'm sure we're very much aligned.
Yes.
So Britt, what prompted us to start the program? Well, actually, we weren't really, at least from my point of view, it wasn't something that we set out to do. This really started off as something that I noticed myself was, I met Mark. Well, I'd met Mark before, but I met Mark, 3 years ago at the 3P conference in London. And what was on my mind at the time was, whilst the conference was absolutely amazing, I loved it. I loved meeting all these wonderful people from around the world. The connections I felt were just really, really, really something special. There was that great element, but I remarked that there was something that we weren't talking about, and that was, whilst this understanding is so incredibly powerful, and we had all these stories that people were sharing of how it had impacted them, and we were all so excited about this understanding, which I saw every single year happens. For some reason, those of us who were doing this work professionally were, either people were struggling, or we weren't having lots of us do this work full time in a meaningful way, right? Mm. And it was kind of the thing, certainly from my point of view, is like, this is a thing that everyone knows, but no one's talking about, right? And to me, that wasn't something to avoid, right? Like, I wasn't coming at this like, hey, there's something wrong with the 3 principles because people aren't able to do this work and seem to not be able, apart from a handful of us, to be able to make this work and make a living. I was like, no, as a community, we need to address this, and we should be having these conversations. And I really want to give Mark a lot of credit, because I would have this conversation when it would come up with anyone who would listen, who was, who'd been around the principles for any length of time. And not saying that people wouldn't listen, but they weren't necessarily interested in that conversation, or certainly that's what I felt. And Mark was really, really open and agreed with me and said, no, Ankush, you're right. And certainly from my point of view, I wanted to check in, with Mark, who I respect so much, is, am I missing something? Am I on the wrong path? Perhaps there was something that I wasn't seeing, which led me to have this view that I was having. And Mark was like, no, Ankush, I think you're right, that there is this struggle. And I want to put words in your mouth, Mark, so, correct me if I'm saying anything incorrect, and carry on. And then through that conversation, we kept in contact, and Mark, messaged me, and we were playing around with the idea of maybe doing some kind of training, live training. But, various times we were both busy and it didn't happen. And then COVID came along, and, the world kind of shut down, and it somehow occurred one day, well, why don't we do this as an online program? And that was something that we could do without, in our own time and kind of work around our schedules. And so we did that, but it was very clear this wasn't going to be just another program, because there are other programs out there. And if there were, we wouldn't need to do this. But this was, from my point of view, really addressing that kind of missing piece where, no matter what training people seem to be doing, there are people who are doing this work full time. There are people who are managing to get paid for it, but they seem to be exceptions. They don't seem to be able to do that. And Mark and I were aligned on, what that missing piece was. And it wasn't one thing. It wasn't away from the principles. It was seeing the principles deeper. And it was, well, what are the implications around that in terms of the practicalities of running and growing a coaching practice? So I've kind of said a lot there. Is that correct, Mark? Is there anything you want to add?
No, excuse me. No, that is my point of view on that was for years in mentoring 3 principles practitioners, now coaches and educators. I saw that there was difficulty with many people sustaining the practice they wanted to create. And for me, it was sustaining their voice in the world. Everyone that I met and mentored had seen something that could help humanity. And in the back of my mind, it was like, I'm seeing that too many of these voices are not being sustained. And then I had known you, Ankush, and at that presentation you made at the conference, I kind of just saw that's it, that our combination can really speak to that. And so then I approached you, and like you said, it was several years of us connecting, and the platform you and I developed also for me allowed what I added to really speak to people being thrilled about sharing this understanding, to see it as really a scientific discovery every time they coach. Because every time you coach and kind of follow some of the ideas we presented in the program, what you share is going to become more relevant to the clients. And each time you share, you're going to see more, because there's infinite understanding. So I saw some people got stuck in sustaining their work because they believed they got it. They believed, I got the principles, and then they would drift from staying deeper with that and staying pure to this understanding. So I saw, when I heard Ankush 3 years ago now, a vehicle that the two of us together could really, really serve our community, where people could really discover that they already know enough to share. And that the more that they did begin to coach people, the deeper their understanding would become. And also, what I learned from Ankush was that you can create a way that you can sustain that voice. There are really practical ways and an understanding of how to create for yourself your coaching practice that can allow you to sustain this voice that really humanity needs to hear. So that's where I was coming from, that spirit, of we have to have some way that people can keep out there in the world and keep creating and also be able to support their lives.
Yeah. I want to say a couple of things to that. Firstly, one, I have said Mark was the one that was receptive to what I had to say, but I'm really glad it was Mark. It wasn't just a case of let me just have anyone on this program with me, but Mark is what I call, I think you have like what I call genius level, both understanding, but ability to help other people see a couple of things, which is really important for coaching and for coaches. And this is true for coaches, whether they're 3P coaches or not, by the way. The first is deep listening, right? And I know I work with a wonderful coach called Steve Chandler. He ran a coaching school for many years. He had kind of 40, 50 people every year come on his school. It was very well known and it would always sell out. And he would assign some resources and some programs that Mark sells around listening, because, and his school wasn't for 3P coaches, but he would assign this to all of them, because it doesn't matter what kind of coach you are, the better you are at listening, the more effective you're going to be at, one, signing clients up, because you're really listening to them and you're understanding what their issues are and challenges are, and therefore able to help them more. But two, you're more likely to be more impactful once people sign up with you, which is going to lead to them more likely to renew with you if that's something that you offer, but also refer you to other clients. That was the first thing. The second thing was his real understanding around rapport. And I don't mean rapport in the traditional way of kind of just getting into rapport with people, but what I call, like soul level rapport, like rapport on the level that I am mind and you are mind, on the rapport on the level of going beyond the content of thought that the client is presenting, and maybe whatever thought that is coming for me, and talking to the person and getting into rapport at the level that's beyond all of that, right? And again, that's true whatever kind of coach you are. If you can tap into that, if we can tap into that, it makes everything else so much easier, right? It cuts through to a deeper level of impact. And so I was so pleased that Mark and I were doing this together, because he's literally the best person in the world. I really mean that. The best person in the world to, number one, demonstrate that. And I'm continually in awe of Mark whenever I see him do a coaching demo, and I learn from it every time. But two, he's able to articulate it in a way that all of us coaches can relate to and learn from and implement. So, I wanted to just say that, Mark, that was one thing. And secondly, again, just touching on your point, Britt, and maybe I'm laboring it, but I want to make the point. I have reached out over the years to so many people who have run programs. I was not interested in creating this program, right? And Mark was not interested in creating this program off the bat, like, oh, let's do a program. In fact, when I used to see people say, hey, you should launch your own program, I was never drawn to that, right? An online program. But I had reached out over the years to so many people who in the 3P community, who were running programs, who were training people. And I offered my services for free. I said, this is really, really, really important for your people to know. I'm not even going to charge you. I will come and speak to your groups for free and teach them some of this practical pieces that are missing from every program that I didn't learn from within the community, within the 3P community. That's going to help your graduates of your programs and your schools to have a sustainable practice. And virtually nobody took me up on that, right? So it's almost like we've had to create this because there was nothing else like it, and no one was realizing the importance of this. And I think what's come out of the feedback we've got is our hunch was correct, because the feedback we've got has just been blowing us away. So I hope that answers your question, Britt. If it doesn't, let us know. But I'm imagining it does. And you say beautiful, great. So Artal has been very patiently waiting from Israel. Was there anything else you wanted to say, Mark, before I jump on to the next question?
Well, you really covered it. I just wanted to share that when I sat there listening to you in your presentation, I knew you were the person that could help me find a way to help coaches, and particularly 3 principles coaches, share that understanding and stay alive, keep their voice alive and sustain that and sustain their livelihood doing coaching, which they already love to be doing. Mm. And so, when we gathered together to do this course, I mean, the reason there are so many chapters is that when we got together each time, you and I would get more insights into like the practical nature of building and sustaining this practice. And we would get more about, well, like, how do you really connect with a potential client where they really want you to serve them, So it's been a beautiful connection between the two of us, adding our unique knowledge that I don't see anywhere else. I really don't see programs addressing even the problem of people who graduate these programs getting a practice together and also sustaining it. So anyhow, I just wanted to add that piece.
Thank you, Mark. So Artal has been patiently waiting. He's the first one to ask a question, and he said, "Hi, Ankush. Can you tell us about how to start making relationships when you don't have any idea how to start?" And Artal, if you want to add anything to that, or let us know more what you mean by that, please do let us know in terms of what you mean by making relationships. I'm assuming you mean creating relationships with prospective clients, because obviously we're talking about creating a coaching practice. Okay, you've said yes. So I would love to hear your answer to this, Mark, and I think this is again a great question to showcase that. So I think there's a practical element to this, which Artal's asking, and I can talk a little about that. But also, I think what's also really important is that whole piece around relationship, right? And we have a huge advantage as 3P coaches or 3 principles practitioners, whatever, because the relationships that we can create through this understanding, I think, goes beyond pretty much anything else out there. So can we start with that, Mark? Can you talk about that? And then I'll talk about some practical things around this question.
Well, what strikes me, I'm not sure how you see me contributing, but what strikes me is that we have an opportunity to feel the connection of a relationship at any time in our daily routines. And, if we really enter our community with the feeling of love and the feeling that everyone around us is the same spiritual energy, and we listen to them, you'll see ways to be able to connect with people beyond your ideas and opinions of them, even in the grocery store. If we're looking at relationships, we're in relationship with all living things, really, if you look at it spiritually. So to get yourself to get that feeling, you have to quiet your own mind and listen to the people that come your way in the day, a phone call, an email, somebody that you run into wherever you are out in your community. That's the place that you get started. And with that comes the listening to them rather than your opinions of them. And And for me, I've gone another step further and really made it a priority to connect to different different organizations and different kinds of people in my community. But I still come from the same state of understanding that every time I'm with someone and I want to build a relationship is to know I'm already in the relationship. I'm already connected. And listening to them provides me a direction. It provides me a way of seeing if I could be of service to this person who just came in front of me. And so that's, I guess, the essence of it. We get sidetracked into thinking we're separate because we have opinions and judgments and about the forms of people that come our way throughout the day. I know that I had to override a telephone call coming in at 7 p.m. the other night, thinking, oh man, again, from Mark Howard, I don't want to be bothered. But again, to just be curious about what the call is and can I be of service and what is the chance of having this relationship? It was a new call. It wasn't from a friend or anything like that. And it turned out to be someone who'd been really searching for a three principles understanding. So that's the spirit of it and the understanding. And if you go out in your community from that consciousness, you'll see yourself connected in relationship to everybody that comes your way. I deliberately went out searching for certain kinds of people in the community to develop coaching relationships with.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I think that's so useful. I'm glad you answered that first as a kind of foundation for this question, because it's so important to have that foundation that we are all in relationship all of the time. Because because I'm going to talk about some ideas and strategies now, but without that foundational piece, any strategy, any idea, any tips really don't land. And I talk about this with coaches that I mentor all the time, that, hey, if you see what I do and just try and copy that, you won't be successful. And a lot of people do. A lot of people look at maybe what I've done, and I notice they'll try and do the same thing that I'm doing, but it often won't be successful because there's this other piece. It's kind of what's behind the strategy. Where are you coming from? Who are you being? What's the energy of that? And so, Artal, as Mark was saying, how do you start making relationships? Well, where do you start, right? Like there are relationships everywhere. And for me, what's really helpful is to look around and see who is around me. And it can be your local community. It could be an online community. We have access to most of the planet from our computers, but it doesn't have to be. It can be your local community, and see where you can be of help to them, right? Not through the agenda of I can teach them the principles and make some money, right? Because that's a really self-serving relationship, right? We might convince ourselves, oh, it's really good for them. But they're not interested in that. Most people, there are some, but most people aren't interested in working with us to get a deeper understanding of the 3 Ps. Most people are interested in their challenges, their issues, their problems, right? So I'm not actively looking for tons of clients. I have a strong business. At the moment, I'm looking at other things, but I moved last year to a village in England. And if I was earlier on in my career and I was really looking for clients, I'll give you an example. One thing that I could do is there are a lot of small businesses in my village. And I can see that there are things that they could, that they're probably struggling with. right? So they might be struggling with the pandemic and being closed down. They're, struggling with being stuck in their ways of doing things. And I don't know if they're open, but I could go out and start connecting with those businesses as simply as giving them a phone call or walking up to their door and saying, hey, I live in the village. I've just moved here. I actually help small businesses. And I was wondering if you're open to being helped, right? And it can be something as simple as that. Or I was really interested in, I love helping small businesses. I was interested in how your business is going and what challenges you're facing right now. And if I did that, yeah, not everyone I imagine would be open. Some people might be reluctant and closed. But if I wasn't too bothered about that, I would end up creating connections and relationships. And through those connections and relationships, I would find ways to help those businesses. And it would just so happen that the way that I would help them would strongly involve my understanding of the principles. Now, I may explicitly share that with them, or it may not be explicit. It may be implicit in what I'm saying, right? Because it's not about my agenda to teach them the principles. I used to be like that. But if I do that, I'm gonna one, create a relationship that's helpful to the person. And two, if it's helpful enough and they see enough value in that, they will want to pay to have kind of more of what I'm giving them, right? And that's just one really small example, but that applies everywhere. And one of the things that when I started out coaching, I started training with a guy called Jamie Smart, who probably most people know. And Jamie would tell us that, hey, when he started out, he just contacted his email list of 200 people and he got his first few clients from there. And I thought, well, that's great for Jamie. He was this guy working in IT, making a lot of money. I bet he had some rich friends, right? And I was like, well, that doesn't apply to me. I don't have the same network that he has. And yet I ended up signing up people to be clients of mine who I already knew. I already was in relationship with them, but I discounted them for whatever reason, right? So over the years, my little brother has become a client. A couple of my best friends have become clients. People that I knew socially whose only interaction was like going out drinking, and we didn't, have any other kind of relationship. But over the years, I would, and a lot of the time it was almost by accident. I wasn't trying to get them as clients. I didn't set out to make family and friends clients, but I would see something they were struggling with and I would try and help them. Often just like, hey, I want to help you. Don't pay me. Let me just help you. And through that relationship, they already trusted me. And a lot of the time they wanted to hire me. I was often surprised because we had a relationship, but that's how this works. And so, that's the other side to it, is that if we just look in our world of people who we're already connected to and see ways that we can help them, right? It could be that your boss is stressed out. It could be that your colleagues are stressed out. It could be that your local hairdresser is struggling to stay afloat. It could be your next door neighbor is really having problems with his teenage son. It could be your wife's friend is going through a divorce. I mean, people have got problems. You're not going to find any shortage of problems or challenges. And so, again, if you're sincere, and this is the important point, it's not about just doing this as a strategy. It's where you're coming from. If you have that real presence of connection to yourself and connection to the principles, then people are going to be more, in my opinion, I don't know what you think, Mark, I think people are more receptive to hearing what you have to say than if it's just, oh, I heard this as a strategy on a webinar, so let me just go out and try and talk to people.
That's right. You can't fake this. And in our area here in San Francisco Bay Area, there's actually communities of business people that that gather with one another to kind of support them. And that was one of the groups I contacted. But here's the thing. Whenever you're with someone, you have to be in a state of how can you serve them? What can you do to help them? And that's where the listening comes in. You really want to hear them and not be coming from, I have this understanding and I'm wanting to find and start talking about what you can do. But you want the way that you explain yourself to come from listening to ways you could be of service to them and what they want in their lives. It never fails that when you really speak from the heart of your understanding, when people ask you, what do you do? Or what do you see that you could be of service? People want it. Maybe if they don't want it, they've said to me, you know what? I've got a brother who could really make use of what you've got to say. Or I've got my colleague can really benefit from you. So it's really, from my perspective, it's sitting in service to whoever you're seeing that you could help, and really listening beyond you thinking to try to get something, and hearing what they're up against, hearing what they'd like to accomplish. And usually they'll ask you about you. And when you share from the heart about what you've seen, how it's helped people, what you'd like to be doing to help people, they'll be touched by that. Everybody, no matter what, wants to gain this understanding. And when you speak from your understanding, they're going to get the feeling of that. So I practically went out and joined a community of business people. And once they started to get to know me, and we had time together, and I was just curious about what they're up against and how I could be of service, listening to that. I could, these colleagues of mine started to see how I could help them or people they knew.
Yeah, there are so many places that we can connect with people, and Artal, what we're discussing here probably spans, I don't know, Mark, maybe 4 or 5 of our videos, maybe more.
Yeah.
Because we're just kind of scratching the surface on this particular webinar. But I mean, I think we did 2 videos on listening. We did another one on rapport. We did another one on kind of getting started, which talks about this. And there may have been more than that. So, but I hope this kind of, is giving you something that is practical that you can take away. But like Mark said, it's about being of service, right? And really what I find when I work with coaches is often they start off with, I don't know who to talk to, right? And I know when I started out, I was like, oh, where's this magical place where I can find clients? There must be somewhere. I need to go and find the place, right? Once I find that place, it's where the wealthy personal development types are who invest in coaches. Once I can find it, I can mine it and I can get my clients. And that's not how it works. And over the years, when I meet coaches, I'm just a curious guy. I like asking them about their businesses. And, there's a coach in America. She gets a lot of her clients from CrossFit, right? She'd go to the local CrossFit gym. And just through who she was, and she's not a 3P coach, right? But she signed up clients at CrossFit. I created a lot of clients via Facebook and certain Facebook groups. But that's because that's where I was already, and I already had relationships with people in that place. I know a client of mine who I asked her, who's your ideal client? And she goes, oh, the lady at the supermarket, the checkout lady. And she goes, I know I can really help her. She talks to me a little bit when I pay for my groceries. And she did. She created her as a client. I coached her around that. There are a million different ways. There are a million different communities and groups that you can create relationships with, which lead to meaningful business paid relationships. But that's not where the answer is, right? It really isn't. It's not about Facebook versus Instagram. It's not about, do I do free talks versus joining a networking group? I've seen coaches create really meaningful relationships and therefore clients in any place that you can imagine, in any way that you can imagine. And it starts with this piece around where you're coming from, and I'll kind of expand a little bit on that, and Mark, feel free to kind of jump in or correct me. But for me, it's like, when I see the truth of the principles, right, which for me is, I am complete and whole and perfect, and my feelings are just a reflection of the principle of thought moment to moment, so that can change. But before that, is my soul, right? It's perfection. And so knowing that means I'm less, and I'm not saying always, right, because I do, but I'm less likely to fall victim to my moment to moment feeling state. And so when I realized that, I found this, I'm not attached to having a relationship mean something, right? I recently signed up a client for a very large fee, tens of thousands of pounds. It's the biggest coaching agreement I've ever had, and we'd agreed this a while ago, and it was all fine. And then 2 days before we were due to begin, and he was to make his payment, he contacted me, and something had happened in his world, and it kind of thrown him for a loop. And he was like, hey, my head's all over the place, and I'm not sure what's going on, and maybe we need to just kind of pause this. This is a really big decision I'm making working with you. And the old me from years ago, where I didn't have as deep an understanding of the principles, would have been like, oh no, this is a lot of money on the line. I need to convince this guy, yeah, the principles, but come on, this is money. And this is important. But thankfully, through work with my mentors and just, experience with the principles, that's fallen away. And so I had this conversation with this guy, and I said, hey, I want to just make it really clear. Whatever happens, I'm okay. If you don't want to work together, that's fine. And I meant it. You can't, like, as you said, Mark, you can't fake this, right? I said, I'm really genuinely okay. I won't be upset. I won't be pissed off. I am okay. If your wisdom is telling you that this isn't the right thing to do, I'm really glad you realized that before you paid me a lot of money, right? If you feel like you want to do a smaller coaching agreement and you don't want to do this big thing that we were planning, that is also okay, right? And if you want to do the thing that we agreed to do, that's cool too. And he said, what do you think I should do? Right? And again, the Ankush that didn't have as deep an understanding might have gone into convincing, hey, I think you should do the big coaching package. And I said, I can't tell you that. Like, your wisdom is going to guide you. And so really what was happening is our relationship was really like, that was the forefront of that interaction. And it wasn't because I was trying that as a strategy or a technique, like, oh, let me get into a stronger relationship with this guy so he pays me. That would be felt by people.
Yeah.
But it's an embodied, like, knowing that I am okay. Okay, there's a practical thing that I'm going to have less money in my account, but that doesn't impact how I feel. And so from that place of knowing, we got into this really deep relationship. He felt how much I cared for him, which I do, and how much I was feeling him in this, personal issue that he was going through. And 2 days later, we're having our call, and again, we're about to have our call again. He has what I would call a wobble, and he's like, "Can we postpone for a week?" And I said, "No problem." Same thing happened. I'm back in relationship with him, but not from a place of convincing. And by the end of the call, I was like, look, you can do what you want. And he's like, let me send you the money now while I'm on the phone. Not because I was telling him to do it, but he settled down, his thinking calmed down because I wasn't in my head. And then he was guided to, you know what, this is what I want to do, which was rather than him falling into the momentary thinking that he was going through. Right. So does that help? Does that make sense, Mark? Does that help in terms of what we're talking about here?
Yeah, it sure does. It really does. Just the kind of simplicity of being of service really quickly. Again, someone who wanted to be able to share the principles and starting out would pick up her children at a school, and the mothers had seen the difference in her from her understanding of the principles and the way she treated her children. As we talked about how she could listen to these mothers in a way that she could offer them what she had seen, because they kept asking her, how do you do this? How do you do this? And she was stumped about how to explain the principles to these mothers. And I said, that isn't the job to share the principles. It's to listen to them and let that listening guide you in terms of how to share to these mothers what you've seen. And so she did that, and it led to her doing a Saturday morning group for these parents. So if you just, as we started, you just know you're in relationship everywhere you go, and you just keep listening to what you can see that you might be able to serve people around you. That's how you get started, and that's how you keep it going too.
Yeah, and I know you expanded on that example in our course. It really is that simple. Artal, please let us know if that has answered your question. And again, we're only able to give a glimpse in the short time we have, but I hope that has been helpful to you. And actually, if it's been helpful to anyone else listening, please let us know. We want to make sure that what we're saying is really useful and practical and helpful for everyone. Okay, Martel said, yes, I got more than I expected. Thanks. Fantastic. Okay, Zainab has also been patiently waiting. I'm gonna defer this one to you, Mark, certainly at the start. What is an appropriate way to navigate the "Are you a psychotherapist?" question? I've had this from people I know, and I can and want to help.
Well, once again, so I'll share a few thoughts about that. But once again, you don't want to, I know this sounds kind of goofy, but you don't want to answer the question literally. You want to know, you want to be able to hear what's up with that potential client that they ask you that. You see? So I would politely say, well, I'll answer that for you, but can you just tell me more about what was it about what we've talked about so far that you asked me that question? What's the importance to you about that particular question? You see? Because if you just answer it right on the spot, what do you have to do? You have to assume what they're asking of you, right? You're not getting any other information but that question. Are you a psychotherapist or whatever they're going to ask you? Are you are you whatever? You see? So already you're a bit off because you have to fill in the blanks of where they're coming from. So whenever people ask you questions, particularly that one, you want to go back and listen first. You want to be curious with them about what's that about. You know, you may not say that directly, but you're going to try to hear more. What went on that they're asking you that question? I'll give you I'll give you my learning from mistakes I've made. I was doing a small group of practitioners early on with my understanding, and somebody said, well, this sounds like Buddhism. What you're saying is just Buddhism in a different package. Well, I knew nothing of Buddhism, but I tried to share how it was different, you know, and of course it didn't land well because it wasn't really what the person was asking. What I've learned when people ask questions like that is to listen first. Otherwise, you're going to be listening to your own thinking. You see, you've got to make assumptions then of what they need to hear. If you don't really get more of what does it mean to them that they're asking that question, and really stay with that, you know, until you really hear something that allows you to really help them with the answer. So that's really how you're going to be impactful and how you're going to know how to answer it. You're not going to know how to answer it when they ask the questions. You've got to go find them with your listening, and you keep dropping your own ideas about what they need to hear until it really smacks you, right? You know, until it really appears to you where they're coming from and why they're asking that. The other thing really is you're not a label anymore. If you're really working from this understanding, you're really beyond the traditional ideas of a psychotherapist, mental health professional, or coach, really. So that's the other thing you want to keep in your heart, is that this understanding and what you're going to share with people really takes you beyond the traditional ideas. But that you keep to yourself. With a question like that, or is this, why this sounds like mindfulness or whatever the current practices are, you have to go find, what did that person hear? What happened to that person? What were they thinking that brought that question to mind? And you do that gently. You do that without any judgment, just curiosity. And you help people know, you help people see that you're just curious. You help them along with that. But again, if you do that, you'll see an answer that will impact them. There's no answer that comes from your assumptions to literally respond to a question that's going to impact them more than what you will get if you really get curious and wonder what's going on in them that they're asking that.
I'm really glad that I asked you to answer that first, Mark, because that's so much better than what I was going to say. So my wisdom obviously deferred to you
in real time,
right? In real time, and this is a really good example. You know, like it's funny because some people have asked me, "Hey, I'm an advanced coach, or I maybe been coaching for a while. Is your course suitable for me. And I said, well, let me put it this way. I learned so much from Mark, like on the course. And really we would record a session, and I'm reminded of that now. And I would come away thinking, oh man, I need to remember that for my coaching sessions tomorrow. And my sessions the following day would always go better because of the video that we had recorded the previous day. And I'm reminded of that now because whilst you've kind of answered Zainab's question, and she said, brilliant, thank you, I made a lot of mistakes around this. This is also true for so many questions like that, right? So many times, people might ask, hey, do you have any qualifications? Do you have a certificate? I mean, I don't really get asked that anymore, but you might get asked that. And often it's helpful to ask what's behind that question. And it's not about avoiding the question, but sometimes there's something behind it. So sometimes people may feel like they have to ask, do you have any qualifications? Because they think they should ask something before they hire you. And so if you try and answer, based on your assumption, certainly I know I've done that far too many times. It doesn't land as well. And I know so many times when I've just asked people to clarify a question they may have, it's actually opened up in a completely different way than I had initially expected. And again, we've got some laser sessions on our program, which are basically 30 to 45-minute coaching sessions where one of us has coached someone. And I know the 3 sessions you did, Mark, are again, they're master classes of what we're talking about here. And if anyone buys the course, I would really encourage you to watch those with Mark, because it's one thing as talking about that, but it's another thing really seeing it in real time of when you've got a coaching client, and the people you coach were not people you've coached before. It wasn't kind of like a setup. It was a real live thing that was recorded in the moment. With I don't think we did any editing really on them at all. And so what you see is what you get. And I'm reminded of that, Mark, of you going back so many times and asking the client, hey, what do you mean by that? And really getting clear. And I know when I would listen to that, I'd be like, well, yeah, the guy means this. And then when you would ask to clarify, they'd say, oh no, I mean this. And I was like, okay, that I didn't see that. And so it may be, Zainab, that someone might be asking you, are you a psychotherapist? Because they want that. They may be asking you because they don't want that. They may be asking you because they are trying to understand in more detail what you're saying. There could be a million reasons why they're asking that question. And so it's useful to, I've even had this with pricing, and I don't always do this, but, sometimes someone might say, hey, what do you charge? And I used to say to people, not that I was trying to be deliberately cagey, but I used to say, do you mind me asking, why are you asking that? Are you interested in hiring me? Or are you just curious about what I charge? They're 2 different things, right? And I just would like to know. And sometimes people would say, no, I'm really interested. I've loved our conversation. I want to work with you. And so I'm curious what that might look like. And sometimes we'll say, oh no, I'm not interested in working with you. I'm just curious what you charge. And I would say to people like that, well, if you're not interested in working with me, then I'm not going to share that information with you, because it changes all the time, right? And I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. And I've probably moved now to a place where I might even end up having my fees on my website. But it is helpful to go in, I feel, and get curious about the questions you're being asked. And I know Steve Chandler has a great example of, he went into, I think it was a law firm, or he went into some organization, And they said, what are your and they were looking at various coaches to bring in to help them. And they said, hey, what are your qualifications? And he said, I'm a recovering alcoholic, divorced, single parent, and I've been bankrupt. And they kind of looked at him and went, well, that's not ideal, right? And he said, why don't you ask me what you really want to ask me? Can I help you? And they went, yeah, that's what we want to know. And you know, the question can phase some people. I mean, he brings a lot of humor into what he does, but it's the same sort of thing. He saw intuitively that the question they were asking wasn't like, oh, what qualifications have you got? And if you haven't got any, then we're gonna not want to work with you. They were asking as they thought they had to. They thought that was the way to get to, can you help us? Does anyone else have a question? Those have been 3 really helpful questions. People have said they've got a lot out of it, and I thank you for everyone else's comments that have enjoyed our answers around it. If you've got any more questions, please do let us know. And while we're waiting, I want to just say that you know, again, Mark and I didn't set out to do this program. It wasn't, a thing that we wanted to create. It's really unfolded naturally. We thought we would create the course in a couple of months. We spent a year really making sure that we create something that was really helpful and worthwhile, and we were both on the same page that if it took longer, we were happy with that. And this has really been a labor of love. But also, if you want to find out more, we'll kind of share the link with people. You can get a link to the course page, and there's some videos in there, quite a few videos that you can watch without paying. But also, in addition to that, what Mark and I are doing, I don't know if people know this, but it's worthwhile mentioning, is we're taking clips from the course, preview clips, and releasing them as standalone videos for free. So on Facebook, Mark's been sharing them on his profile, and I've also been sharing them on YouTube. So if we released an hour-long video on rapport, we might release 10 or 15 minutes of that video for free to the public. And we've released, I think, 3 of them so far, but we'll be doing more. So, we really just want to make sure where we're coming from is really, we want to really help this community, and ensure that, if you've been touched by this understanding, if you really want to do this work and get paid for it, which helps you sustain this work, then we want to make sure that there's not the gap in that understanding that's going to stop you from doing that. So really, that's where we're coming from.
Yeah.
Artal has asked, what do you do when you feel suddenly disconnected emotionally from your client in a conversation? Because it's happened to me a few times.
You want me to share?
Yeah. I'm giving you all the easy questions, Mark.
You have to quiet down. The only reason any of us get to feel disconnected is because we got caught up in our thinking, really. So you have to just get quiet. You got to really just clear your thinking, get yourself quiet, and come back to the understanding that whether or not you're feeling disconnected, that's a mirage, because spiritually you are connected. But all that is just a sign that you got to thinking. So go easy with yourself and get quiet. And And usually from there, I might just reach out and try to come back to the rapport section and just get the feeling back some way, just kind of trying to connect back with the person around their lives. I remember, I think I may have even shared, it's coming to mind again, so I may have shared this on the course, but there was a client of mine that was a really big name in Alcoholics Anonymous, really huge name. And he was talking, and I challenged him around his ideas from AA, and the room went cold. If you wanted to feel disconnected emotionally, it was like immediate ice in the room. I just felt disconnected to this person, and gosh, I didn't know what to do. And so it just occurred to me to quiet down and just, again, get back to getting the feelings back, which is what we talk about in terms of rapport. So I knew he had grandkids. And so I just kind of asked him about his grandkids, and he started to warm up. And we just kind of talked about those together, and the feeling started to come back. And then it occurred to me to just apologize. And I love this because I really see that we're human to human here, heart to heart. So it occurred to me to apologize, and I apologized for disrespecting his ideas. And I knew too from my work in the field that there is wisdom in these self-help recovery programs. And I mentioned that to him as well. All of this came back to me once I got my bearings back, and I got my bearings back by quieting down and just trying to get the feeling back with this human being and developing the rapport again, coming back to that and really staying at developing the rapport. And once it started to come back in the room, and within the two of us, it occurred to me where to go next. And again, the apology and also my explanation that I really didn't listen well to him. There was a grain of truth in what he was saying. Can we go back and look at that together and see where this understanding of the principles could add to that? So don't panic. Don't judge it, because I think it happens a lot more than people share on their videos, that during a coaching session, you do lose some connection to your client in some way. And that's only because you got into thinking. That's really it. You're just now listening to your own personal thinking about the client or about the situation or however it is they look to you. And you got to quiet that down and go back to building the rapport again and regaining that and work at that, however long it takes. So that would be my short answer to your question.
I love that, Mark. And, I'm reminded that we did an hour-long video called Making Adjustments, because in the course, because it's exactly this piece that Artel is asking about, is like, it's great us talking about this, but what happens real time in your conversation with a client, and you've maybe misstepped and not listened, or you've lost the rapport, or one of these things that we're talking about, and this happens real time in making those adjustments, and it's possible to reconnect with people. And I think there's another piece as well for me, which is comes back to the principles, and I guess what people call grounding, is that the deeper well, let me put it this way: when I met people in the 3P community, like yourself, and your colleagues like Dick and Bettinger and Keith Blevins and people like that, I would just feel such non-judgmental presence, right? And love from people I didn't really know that well. Like very quickly, I would feel this connection, and if I'm honest, I didn't have that straight away. I had glimpses of it, and over time, what I found is that as I've seen the principles deeper, I have dropped a lot of my own thinking, judgmental thinking against myself, and as I've done that, I've ended up falling more and more in love with people, right? Or falling in that feeling of love. And I think that's the other piece too. We've got this video on the purity of the principles, and you've talked about, really exploring this understanding over decades. And I think that's also an important piece for us to talk about, because, like it's very easy for us to say, oh, I did a course, I understand the principles, right? And there's no end to that. And the deeper we go, it helps with things like this, right? And it's helped me. I would feel more disconnected in years gone by when I had a shallower understanding, and the deeper I've gone with the principles, I've become less, like I said, less judgmental to me, and therefore more loving to myself, and as a result, more loving to everyone else. And so I've even had a client, and if you pardon my language, I had a client tell me to go fuck myself. And this is recently, and I didn't take it offensively at all, because I could see I was challenging him in a very gentle way. I mean, I wasn't showing him or anything, but I was challenging his worldview, and I was taking away his excuses for being a victim and upset, in that moment. And so he was kind of like lashing out, but I was able just to be still connected and loving with him in that moment, because it wasn't about me. And at the end of the call, he said, thank you so much. And he goes, I'm so glad I can just say whatever's coming up in the moment to you, and you don't take it personally. And I said, I really don't, but I know if someone had said that to me in the first few years of me coaching, my ego would have got involved. I would have felt disconnected from them. I would have personalized it. And that would have got in the way, and I used to take myself way too seriously when I started out coaching. And so I think, there's both of those things. It's kind of like we said, in the moment and adjusting. And then I think there's also like this longer term journey that we're on, that you also talk about so beautifully in our course, around just seeing the principles deeper, which helps with so much more of this stuff. Mm-hmm. We've got a few minutes left. Do you want to have a real quick go at answering Zainab's question, which is, and again, I know we talk about this on the course, but the distinction between educating, I'm guessing teaching the principles, versus coaching?
Well, they're just words. For me, all throughout my mentoring and coaching three principles practitioners, I've always used the word teaching. Somebody said, well, I don't think it's teaching, and okay. I remember a supervisor of mine said, well, then substitute the word you want in there, I don't see a difference. It really is, it's really a process where you're helping a human being. If you're looking at three principles work, you're helping a human being realize where their experience is coming from, truly where it's coming from. And the work and our course, part of our course is to support that, is to talk with you. Ankush and I talk on the course about how do you get there and how do you keep that going. In addition, it's waking people up to what they truly are. And so, you know, it can work in the framework of coaching. It can work in the framework of people being an educator, but it's beyond that. The other piece we haven't spoken to today that we talk a lot about on the course, both of us, that, you know, you are mind. You said it in the beginning, Ankush, both you and the client, the group, the participants are mind. You are this spiritual energy with the intelligence before the universe guiding you. So really, you know, that's what you want to stay open to. And so what comes to mind for you to share is really coming from that wisdom you have, that intelligence. And then you can fit it into any structure that you'd like to fit it into. But I don't really see that the labels really talk, or the labels really don't describe what you're really about. And now there may be other practicalities you bring into what you want to do as a coach. You may talk to people around that because they're familiar with that term. You may talk about it your way. But when you're coaching or teaching or sharing, in that moment, you're beyond a label of what you're doing, because it's pure in the moment of you sharing with someone what you understand at that moment, what you see, as to help them realize where their experience is coming from, so they develop their own ways to handle the issues they're coming to you for help.
You know, it's such a great point that you make. And, you know, I know that there are some people who would have a strong view about coaching as a certain way. And, you know, in coaching, you should never do any teaching, and pure coaching is a certain way. And you know, that's a valid viewpoint. And one of the things that I have realized is the only people who really care about this question are coaches. But the people we're talking to don't really care that much. The only thing they care about is, can you help me? Right? I would say most of the time. You know, I mentor a coach at the moment who used to be a therapist, and we were having a session, and he said, "Oh, I've got someone who's contacted me for therapy, but I'm gonna refer them to someone else because I don't do therapy anymore. I'm doing coaching." And this person is a 3P coach, and I said, "Well, it doesn't matter, right? Whether they're looking for therapy and you're doing coaching, they're looking for help. And can you help them?" And he said, "Yeah, I can." I went, "So help them." Right? And the person ended up becoming a client of his. And I said, they don't care. You're more bothered about, oh, this is coaching and this is therapy. But I would say 99.9% of the time, the person doesn't care. And what I've seen with, you know, what we call like world-class coaches, and this is true in any field, like you learn how to do things and you get to a certain point and then you break all the rules, right? And you know, it's helpful for me to give myself permission to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as long as, and I did this very early in my career, it's like, as long as I'm coming from a good place, as long as I'm coming from loving the person, serving them, really wanting to help them, then I'm going to give myself permission to anything, right? And that doesn't mean I'm kind of rude or not at all, but it just means that I'm not going to get so hung up on that. And I remember whenever I've tried to do coaching or tried to do things in a certain way, I end up being less effective. So I love your answer, you know, about it's just a label, right? Because actually that's really true in my experience. And it's coming back to the heart of this work, which is really just helping people.
I love that, Ankush. Again, you know, when you, as we talked about, particularly as you talk about creating clients on our program, people aren't hiring a psychologist or a coach. They're not connecting with you or asking for you to go further with them because you're a coach or you described what a coach is like or what a psychologist is like or whatever. They saw you could help them. And if they know you can help them from you sharing from your certainty of what you've understood, they're going to become your client. Yeah. So I love that piece. That's what came to mind for me, Ankush, when you shared that. People want to see that you can help them, period.
Yeah.
And like, you know, in the early research of psychology looked at helpers in the community that were just natural people that help people. They were just like a neighbor or somebody in the community everybody would go to when they were troubled. And they were just quite naturally helping them. They weren't anything. You know, but they were called these natural healers in the community, and there's a lot of research on that in the 1970s. And so that's the piece to keep in mind. Yeah. And again, if you get asked about that, inquire first and see where that's coming from. But really see that when you can speak from how you can serve this person and help them, that's what they're looking for with you.
Yeah. So we're going to just wrap up there. We've kind of run out of time. So thank you everyone for your questions tonight. We've really just scratched the surface of what's covered in the course, but I hope we gave you all a glimpse of that, you know, as best as we could in the time that we had. I really want to help those who have joined us today. And so I don't know, Mark, how you feel about this, but I'm kind of going with my feeling in the moment. And I would love to give access to people on the webinar tonight. One of the laser sessions that we've done, I'm thinking about one of yours, the full laser session. So if they email us, if you email me at info at ankushjain.co.uk, or if you're on Facebook, just message me on Facebook. What I'll do is I'll send you a link to that full video that you can watch, which is really a masterclass by Mark, and gives you more of a feeling for what the course is about. Is that okay, Mark?
Oh, I love that. I'm on board. I would love people to see if they could get something from one of our demos. So yeah, I'm on board with that, and appreciate people being here, listening to us, and, you know, asking really valuable, meaningful questions.
Thank you. Wonderful. I've so enjoyed tonight. I've learned again from you, Mark, as I always do, and so appreciate you. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And if you watch on the replay, great to have you on the replay, and look forward to us connecting in the future whenever we do.
Thank you, everyone.